Hi, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Yacht Crew Vlogs right here on Yachting International Radio. My name is Ria. I am your host, and today I am joined by Strez from the New Zealand Sailing Trust. You are the head skipper now?
That's right. Yep. Yep. Pleased to say that. Been head skipper now for a good couple of years. I've been with the Sailing Trust for 3.5 years. So all's going well, and we're sort of just getting through this. Wow, for us it's sort of post-COVID, but I think for the rest of the world it's still very much COVID. So everyone's dealing with that, and just slowly trying to get back into it. But yeah, I think there's a tiny bit
Well,
of light
tell
at the
us
end
a
of the
little
tunnel.
bit. Well, for sure. I mean, we are seeing straight across Europe as well. Gradually borders are starting to open. I found it really ironic that the ports were open, but the borders weren't. So as far as chartering and sailing and owners coming to their boats, et cetera, it was impossible. It was sort of backwards, I would think. Travel first and then ports open for charter yachts and stuff. But you know what? I mean, this is a situation that governments across the face of the planet have never seen before. So I'm not sure anybody really knows how to react. Nobody can be blamed for doing the best job that they can.
For sure, for sure.
Well, and
Yeah, I
you're
think New
lucky in
Zealand.
New Zealand.
Oh yes, yeah. I definitely feel very lucky for many reasons, but we're a little island in the down south, middle of the South Pacific sort of thing, and away from a lot of the world's troubles, so it's a good place to be, and the government's dealt with it pretty well, so we're on a pretty good road to recovery, and there's some positive signs, with regard to things like the America's Cup. Sounds like it's, dare I say it, going ahead, and they're opening up some exemptions to people travelling in for that, the crews and the teams behind them and their families. So that's a really great start, So fingers crossed that continues to head in the right direction.
I'm sure it will. I'm sure it will. Right. I wanted to ask you a little bit about yourself before we get into you being the head skipper of New Zealand Sailing Trust and what that all entails. But tell us a bit about you and where you're from and what got you into sailing in the first place.
Okay. I grew up in Auckland, on the north shore of Auckland, city of sails. Very, very lucky to grow up on a waterfront property. If anyone's familiar with Auckland, Little Shoal Bay on the north shore there, we had a waterfront, still have a waterfront property there that steps down to the water's edge, and a little boat shed in there. Part of my sort of grandparents' legacy. So yeah, we grew up, with dinghies, direct access to the water. So really, really lucky. And my sort of childhood growing up was, I don't know, more, a lot of it was water based, like I guess other kids might have been making go-karts and trolleys and things. We were making rafts and messing around in boats, so yeah, salt in the veins, I guess, so we would sort of fish down there and snorkel and mess around in the mud flats, rode dinghies out into the bay, and we had a little sailing dinghy, so we learned to sail from a pretty early age, and then a little bit later had a very small day sailor. So yeah, we had a lot of access to that kind of thing. I don't know, I wasn't a big sailor. I mean, I could sail, I enjoyed it, loved all that stuff, but growing up, it wasn't a passion. I was involved in all sorts of different things, but what was a passion was the ocean. So it was for sure that I was headed in some sort of path that was going to be ocean, sea related, and I certainly didn't have thoughts or ambitions to be, a sailor or a boat captain of any sort, it wasn't really the sort of thing back then, but I certainly had dreams of being something to do with the ocean, maybe a marine biologist. A lot of people sort of dream about that, and I, later went and studied the ocean. I did a diploma in marine studies, so we did study sort of sciences and marine biology to an extent. But with that course, we also spent a lot of time on the water, and actually a huge amount of time underwater, scuba diving. And we did a lot of things that were, on or with boats. We did a lot of tourism type activities. So it was a really broad sort of reaching course. So, we learned a lot and had a lot of amazing experiences. And I think from that point, I started to really enjoy the tourism, the people side of, water sports and things like that, as opposed to, being in a lab, science kind of stuff. So I guess I was sort of headed in that path, and then did the obligatory sort of OE experience. I was in London for some time, and then visited friends in the south of France, and it was really there that I saw that there were all these beautiful big boats. People were getting jobs on them, and we thought, my brother and I was with me at the time. We thought, that sounded like a pretty good sort of thing. So we walked the docks like so many people do back then. This is going back a good 20 years now. But we walked the docks and got jobs on boats as deckhands. Big sort of motorboats for me to begin with. And did a few seasons on some motorboats. Had a lot of fun, but pretty quickly realised that it was all about polishing stainless steel and looking after that kind of stuff. What it's like. So I knew there was more to it, and my brother was on a yacht at that time, so I went and joined him, and we really got into sailing. So probably did 9 years, I guess, on and off, on various sailing yachts in the Mediterranean and Caribbean, all sorts of Atlantic crossings. I did a lot of time on classic yachts and had a ton of fun on classic yachts doing the regatta circuit. Around the Mediterranean. Really, really good people. Sort of a relaxed atmosphere, and people who are good sailors in there because they really wanted to sail. They loved it. It wasn't just about traveling or getting paid. We were all doing it because we loved it. Yeah. But you're sort of living out of a suitcase for all these years, pretty much. In a cabin, you're sharing with people, and eventually that gets tiresome. And it was time to move back to New Zealand. So I moved back there, and gosh, I can't even remember, probably 8 years ago, I suppose, back to New Zealand. Worked then on some tourism boats in New Zealand, whale and dolphin watching, skippered those sorts of boats through necessity, really. It was a bit of fun at the time again, but for all the sailing New Zealanders do, the amazing sailing we have here, the amazing top-level racing sailors we sort of foster and develop here in New Zealand, there's very few sailing jobs, So unless you're racing professionally, perhaps in another country representing New Zealand, there's not much here. So you take what you can get if you're a skipper. And then I guess I was looking for another job, and just purely by chance saw a job for the New Zealand Sailing Trust. At that stage, didn't know much about it, but quickly did my research, and look, long story short, here I am 3.5 years later. I've loved it. It's a great organisation, amazing. I really enjoy working for a charitable trust, rather than some sort of wealthy yacht owner. You're doing something worthwhile. It's really great. So that's in a really short nutshell, me and how I sort of ended up where I am, I guess.
Well, let me ask you, I see a passion in sailors that I don't normally see in motor yachts. For you, having had the experience on working on motor yachts and on sailing boats, what is it that drew you to sailing, and what is that passion that really brings you back to sailing at the end of the day?
I think it's a tough question, really, and I think it probably brings up, a lifetime of experiences, and having those experiences sailing. So enjoying that, feeling the power of the wind, when the boat heels over, and you sort of get going. So I think there's an excitement in that, and of course, motorboats are fun, and they've got their place, but there's something a bit different about sailing, and I guess the people that sail the boats, it's perhaps a bit more of an adventurous spirit. There's a lot more going on a sailing yacht, a lot more to think about, a lot more skills to have, rather than just maintaining a boat and keeping the engine running and all that kind of stuff. So I don't know. There's such a beauty in sailing, and I think once you've started doing a bit of sailing, you see that, you feel it, and you understand it. So I don't know. Maybe there's just a little bit more emotion attached to sailing, perhaps. A bit more spirit, dare I say it? It's not to put down motorboat people or people that work on them, of course, or owners of them. But there's just a bit more going on, and there's a bit more adventure involved, I think. And excitement, if not, dare I say it, terror at times. You're off. Motorboats typically aren't out there in bad conditions. You wait for the right conditions. Yachts, you're out there, because you want some wind, and it can pretty strong winds out there, and it's all on, So yeah, there's definitely something a little bit different. I don't know whether that answers the question or explains it, but yeah, there is a difference.
Well, the other thing I notice is that there's more of a connection that I see. The sailors tend to have more of a connection to the ocean than you see that, sailors come from either a scuba diving background or definitely a sailing background, but, they've gone into, like you, marine biology or, scuba diving or really connecting to the ocean. And you don't see that a lot with motor yachts, I think, is in my experience as far as interviewing people anyway.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I've seen the same things. Yeah, typically someone with a lot of money, buys a motorboat. Just the done thing. What am I going to spend my money on? Let's buy a boat, but they buy a motorboat. But people who have a bit more of a connection, understand that beauty, or have a, maybe soul's not the right word for that, but I don't know. There's a beauty in sailing, and people who really see that and enjoy it, they tend to buy sailing yachts, because they're there, but they're a bit slower, it's the journey to get somewhere rather than just getting, it's them being in that new place,
Yeah. Well, tell me a little bit about the New Zealand Sailing Trust. You have two, legendary sailing yachts for New Zealand and for, in fact, the world that you folks have taken on as your main vessels.
Yeah, that's right. We're very lucky. They're not super yachts. They are super yachts, but they're not super yachts. They are, for those that maybe aren't familiar, they're maxi racing yachts. So they're both in that region of about 80 feet. 25 odd meters, 24 meters, and made very, very famous by, Sir Peter Blake, Steinlager 2 in particular, winner of the 89-90 Whitbread around the world race, and Lion New Zealand was the predecessor 4 years earlier, who came a respectable second. So yeah, we're very lucky. They're certainly world famous in New Zealand, and for any sailors around the world, they would know. I'd be surprised if they didn't know Steinlager 2 and the amazing and ultimately tragic story of Sir Peter Blake. So it's people get behind the yachts, they get behind the story, they love what we're doing with them now, which is essentially youth development. We dabble in other stuff to help fund youth development, corporate bits and pieces. But yeah, for mostly we're taking out high school age school kids, from a variety of backgrounds, some sort of wealthier type backgrounds and demographics, and some of the really lowest demographics. So a real mix of people. But yeah, sort of 13, 14 at the youngest, typically up to sort of 17. But we also do some sort of university groups and maritime school type trips as well, teaching them a bit about sailing. But yeah, we're not just teaching them about sailing. It's more of a, it's an experience for sure. Up to 6 days away with us. Some schools might just do a couple of days or anywhere in between. But as well as teaching them a bit about sailing, and you can't make a sailor out of someone in just a few days, but you can certainly give them a taste of it and a really amazing experience. And we sort of we teach them a bit about leadership, or at least, give them that opportunity to demonstrate leadership within themselves, and certainly a lot of teamwork or team building games. So, you have to work as a team to sail a maxi yacht. We run activities on beaches, we build rafts, we build a fire in the places that we can in the evenings occasionally, and we have a lot of fun. So the kids bond a lot. It's a real shared experience. There's all sorts of challenges to overcome, and more often than not, you see some real changes in some of the kids, and they certainly leave the boat having had a pretty good time, I would say.
After 3.5 years of being head skipper and watching these kids leave the boats, whatever socioeconomic background they come from, what do you think is the most important thing that they take away, whether it be, a day trip or 6-day trip? What do you think is the most important thing that these kids take away from that experience?
I think one of the most important ones, and you see it time and time again, is a confidence, a realization that they can do it. some of the wealthier schools that come on board, well, I should say for the most part that most people that come on the boat, despite their background, most people haven't been on a boat before, haven't sailed before. But yes, you get a small handful. And the ones that have been on the boat, there's less sailors, and the sailors amongst them have probably been, dinghy sailing and stuff like that. From some of the more the lower socio-economic groups, some of the kids have barely been out of their, own area of Auckland or their neighbourhood, let alone on a big boat. So they come on board being a bit nervous, a little bit scared, perhaps unsure of themselves and what this is all about. But by the end of it, I mean, it's those guys that have blossomed the most. The most growth from them, amazing experience, realization that this is something new for them and they can do it. Maybe the kid that got a bit seasick on the first day has finally come right after a couple of days, which is the benefit of these longer trips. It gives them that chance to get over those little hurdles. And at the end of it, they're bouncing around and singing and laughing, and they've had an amazing experience. So it's hard to know where that would take them, but it might just mean that they open that door instead of that door when some opportunity arises. It's hard to say where it would really take them, but hopefully somewhere good.
You also teach them quite a bit about the environment as well.
Yeah, that's right. We not necessarily all trained environmentalists, but we certainly have a real appreciation and a love of the ocean and the environment. And we're really lucky in Auckland here. We have this amazing Hauraki Gulf. There's islands everywhere. It's generally well protected, whichever the wind direction. We've got some very special, well-protected islands there. Those of you familiar with New Zealand, we have a lot of flightless birds and special animals that are now only found on well-protected offshore islands, pest-free islands. And there's about 50 different islands, believe it or not, dotted around the Hauraki Gulf. And, we visit them and we, teach them what we can about that. And we certainly, have an environmental angle, and we run the occasional trip in conjunction with Blake Trust, which is a bit more environmentally focused, and, drag a plankton net and have a look at what we find under a microscope, so we want to do more of that. So we're aiming towards that. But certainly there's a lot of wildlife out there. So, we spend enough time on the water to know a bit about it and can impart a bit of knowledge to the kids and sort of show them what's there and, why it's worth sort of saving. And we do a really great activity pretty much on every trip, and most beaches we go to when the opportunity and time is there. But we do beach cleans, such an easy thing to do. But we, walk along the beach and, get everyone searching for little bits of plastic and whatever stuff we can pick up, and, always leave it better than we find it. So that's a really rewarding thing to do. And, I think the kids take something from that home as well.
Well, and hopefully pass it on to their families, because I think the more people that get involved in that sort of thing, the better our environment will be as a whole. I wanted to ask you, the New Zealand Sail part of what goes into keeping this running is, of course, making sure that your vessels are up to par. Now, just recently, one of your vessels was put in, I'm not sure for a refit or for maintenance.
Probably about a year ago now. Lion New Zealand had a really big refit. She'd been around the block a few times, and was in need of some love. So she had it's probably began 2.5 years ago now, I want to say. So Yachting Developments did an amazing job, and she was out there for quite a long time. And because being a charitable trust with all sorts of other costs and not a lot of money coming in, we rely heavily on donations and people in the marine industry that support us massively. So anyway, things took a lot longer than expected. So the refit turned out to go on for about 1.5 years, but the result in the end was well worth it. So Lion New Zealand these days is feeling like the newer of the two boats these days. So she's awesome. So she's got another 20 years ahead of her, at least before.
Well, at the end of the day, in order to keep these vessels going, you're going to have to do the refits, and you're going to have to maintain them and make sure that they are in peak performance capabilities. But as a result of COVID and as a result of the 3 months where pretty much the world stopped, your main sources of income, which are of course fundraising, and the different people that take the vessels out, and the different groups that participate, all of a sudden you saw most of your funding dry up. And that put a little bit of a question mark over the future of the New Zealand Sailing Trust. Now, with the New Zealand Sailing Trust being such an important part of the history of New Zealand, and the ability to take so many youth and teach them about the ocean and teach them about sailing and teach them about the future of the ocean, there's a need to raise money.
Absolutely, yeah. Our funding, well, yeah, stopped completely. So yeah, lots of outgoings, as big yachts have, marina berths, and the list goes on and on. But when schools stop coming, and everyone else is affected, that stopped dead in our tracks. So I guess we're just starting to see a few schools now that we've sort of talked about how well New Zealand at this stage has got, hopefully through COVID, fingers crossed. But the ball is rolling. Schools are back. They're starting to rebook their trips. We can start making a few funding applications. But yeah, it still is a bit scary. We still don't know what the future holds, but there is light at the end of the tunnel. And we're trying to think of creative ways to raise money, and now just starting to go back to the people that have sort of helped us in the past and applying for different grants and things like that. And of course, some of our income is from, the kids do pay. Not all of them pay. Some of them that are qualified for it get grants to come with us and things like that themselves. But it's hard, So yeah, we need we need money. We need people to help us. So I think I'm not a marketing person, sailor, but there's other people with great ideas, and I think in one of your other interviews you might have talked about the pass the bucket thing that the guys sort of came up with to try and raise some money. And it's small things, but I suppose the biggest thing is just to get the word out there, let people know about the Sailing Trust. Maybe other people have got creative ideas about how to raise money.
You already do have a variety of ways in which you guys can raise money, and hashtag Pass the Bucket Challenge is one, just to raise the awareness. Of course, on your website, there are a variety of other ways, and we're going to make sure to put the website. And, even if people just donated €1 or a pound or $1, Canadian, Australian, US, it doesn't matter. The fact is, the more people that see this, and just a little bit goes a long way when it is a lot of people coming together to benefit one thing. And it's, €1 is not a lot of money. But when you've got, say, 50,000 people donating that €1, well, that is a lot.
Yeah, exactly. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Yeah, you're right. At this time, there are so many, really worthy causes to be donating money to, so it's hard. I don't like asking for money. No one does really. But, you're right. If it's just a couple of bucks or something like that, or even if you can't, I guess a great way is just, sharing it, or passing on, joining the Facebook page, seeing what we're doing, and, just getting the word out there, I suppose, maybe someone else can help,
Yeah, no, it's such an amazing concept, and the fact that you've taken the history of New Zealand, and such a beautiful and rich history, as what you have, and you're maintaining that for the country of New Zealand, and taking the future of New Zealand and teaching them about one of their greatest legacies. I think that's absolutely phenomenal, and it's a well worth cause to donate a few, whatever you can, or even just pass the message, in order to make sure it continues on into the future. Our ocean is our legacy the world over, not just New Zealand. And if we all take the time to teach the youth about how to take better care, of our environment as a whole, then possibly they're going to be able to pass that on to their children, and so on and so on. Because I'll tell you, our generation didn't do a very good job of it. So someone's going to have to take up that slack.
Yeah, for sure. No, I absolutely agree.
Well, so I'm going to make sure to post all the information for you guys underneath this interview when it airs. And I have to say to the viewing audience out there, Andre has a ton of patience because this is the third time that I've tried to do this interview as a result of background noise. So I do thank you. You are the head skipper of the New Zealand Sailing Trust, so you have much more important things to do than come on board here. But I do appreciate your time and your patience, and thank you for sharing your message with the yachting industry.
It's been a pleasure, Ria. Thanks for the time to talk to you about it. Cheers. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Once again, this has been Andre Strez, the head skipper from New Zealand Sailing Trust. You've been watching another edition of Yacht Crew Blogs right here on Yachting International Radio. My name is Ria. I have been your host. Tune in again for another episode.